From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The head of the Secret Service resigns after a blistering congressional hearing on its failure to protect former President Trump from the assassination attempt recently in Pennsylvania. Meantime, House Republicans and Democrats agree to set up a bipartisan task force with subpoena power to get to the bottom of what went wrong. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, editorial board member Colin Levy and columnist Kim Strassel. Kimberly Cheatle, the director of the Secret Service, sent an email to her staff on Tuesday. Here's part of what she said. "I do not want my calls for resignation to be a distraction from the great work each and every one of you do towards our vital mission." She added that in light of recent events, it is with a heavy heart that I have made the difficult decision to step down as your director. Let's listen to Speaker Mike Johnson reacting to the news that the Secret Service director had stepped down.
She just resigned?
She just resigned. Can you say how this changes oversight of the assassination attempt now?
Well, she must have been watching our press conference. I'm glad she did the right thing. Look, our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that she has heeded the call of both Republicans and Democrats. Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency. It has an incredibly important responsibility in protecting presidents, former presidents, and other officials in the executive branch, and we've got a lot of work to do.
And here is one of those calls for resignation. This is Congressman Ro Khanna at the hearing on Monday.
Would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981? Of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. And Stuart Knight was not a Democratic appointee or a Republican appointee. Look, I'm not questioning your judgment. I just don't think this is partisan. If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign.
Colin, you were dialed into this congressional hearing on Monday. What happened? And it seems to me that the lawmakers on the panel there were very dissatisfied in what they were hearing from the Secret Service director.
Right, Kyle. I think the hearing really was just a blistering failure. There were so many moments, so many opportunities that she had to answer the questions that I think everyone wanted to hear some answers to, and she just stonewalled. So I really don't think there was any question coming out of it that she needed to resign. I think her non-responses were disqualifying, and even more than that, her attitude coming into the hearing really was sort of dismissive and at times I think a bit arch. This was obviously an immensely serious event, and she should have known that she was going to have to provide serious answers, not denials and obfuscations and comments that she couldn't speak to an ongoing investigation. There were moments during the hearing when she was asked direct questions about the security perimeter at the rally and about who should have been responsible within the chain of command. And she should have had answers for lawmakers there. And I think the way that she handled it made it clear to people in both parties that she really did need to be replaced. What she really put off, and I think the reason that there was such bipartisan condemnation of her performance, was that she gave a sense that she was sort of circling the wagons and refusing to speak out of almost as though she were protecting the reputation of the Secret Service or protecting secrets. Maybe she was afraid she was going to say something wrong or that she would give away where mistakes were made. But that really goes counter to the need for transparency right now. And I think it gave the impression that there was a tendency to not comment or deny and cover up. And that's a real problem. I think as an agency director, you have to be able to speak the truth about failures without disparaging agents. And there's a way to do that. If you really can't speak about something, the answer isn't to say it's because there's an ongoing investigation and, hey, we're going to let you know in 60 days. She could have said something like, that's truly classified. I can't speak to that, but we can talk about that in closed session. So I'm not surprised it went the way it did.
The Wall Street Journal news story on this says that the director declined to answer questions about how the security perimeter was drawn for the rally, whether law enforcement swept the roof in advance, or how many agents were assigned to the event. She was asked whether the Secret Service had an agent on top of the roof where the shooter ultimately fired on President Trump from. And here's her response. Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation, Cheatle said, deflecting the question as lawmakers collectively groaned. Kim, do you agree that it was time for Cheatle to step down, or maybe do you agree with Mike Johnson that this should have happened a week ago? I guess my one hesitation immediately after the assassination attempt took place is I didn't know who the number two was, who would step up to replace her. And remember, we are only about 100 days out from a presidential election. There are presidential candidates that are crisscrossing the country, having rallies everywhere. Although if there is not a competent number two who could step up and fill her place, that would be a different kind of failure by the Secret Service.
I don't see how she couldn't go. Just given what we do know the failings were from that day, they're really inexplicable. And I think that was part of her problem at this hearing yesterday, is that maybe the reason she didn't want to give answers to some of these things is because there simply is no good answer. These were out and out failings. As she said in her resignation letter, the buck stops with me. She takes full responsibility. If that is truly your attitude, then I think a failing of this level justifies you resigning immediately. And I would like to think that the Secret Service does have the ability to operate and the people around and in place to have someone step up to fill that hole. President Biden has come out and said he will move swiftly to name a replacement. I would note, by the way, I don't know how this rolls in the short term, given the priority you noted about getting someone back on the position. But there's already been legislation introduced in the Senate, I believe, that would require future Secret Service directors to actually be confirmed by the Senate, something that does not happen now. But the thing that was remarkable to me, too, it wasn't just what we already knew about the handlings, but as Colin said, her performance at this event, it was almost as if it was designed to rile the lawmakers. There were moments she just shrugged in answers to questions to them as though she really didn't think that she even needed to be there. It just really shows, I think, a lack of awareness of the delicacy, not just of this current failure, but that it comes on the back of a string of Secret Service failures that have really put it in the news over the last 10 years. There was a moment when it deleted all of its text messages after the January 6th moment. There was in 2011 an armed man that shot at the White House. The Secret Service didn't even realize it had happened for several days. Another man with a knife in 2014 who jumped over the fence and made it all the way to the East Room. We had the agents who were down in Colombia and had brought prostitutes to their hotel rooms when they were down on an advanced security sweep for Barack Obama. We've had reports about these and recommendations from Congress. One of the things that members noted yesterday was a lot of those recommendations, despite having come from a number of different congressional committees and IGs and reports, had not been implemented even today, almost a decade later. So I think this was an agency head that needed to come in with some humility and do her best to explain where the agency stands and what it's been doing and what it thinks went wrong. And that's not what happened yesterday.
Hang tight. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back. There is new information that is coming out, if slowly, about what happened that day in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is providing some of it after his speech at the Republican National Convention last week, where he said he would tell the story only once because it was too painful. He was on Fox News on Monday giving some new details about his experience. Listen to this.
Well, they wanted to put me on a stretcher. They had a stretcher, and they wanted to put me on a stretcher. And I said, I'm not going on a stretcher, because I just felt it was the ear. And there was a lot of blood coming. I don't know if you've heard this, but the ear causes, they say, the most in the body. You get hit in the ear. Better than just about any other place in one way, but in another way it bleeds more. And there was a lot of blood, but I understood. They thought I was hit elsewhere. They thought I was hit actually in this area. And I wasn't. I said, I'm telling you, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm going to get up. I want to get up. I'm not going to be taken out on a stretcher.
Colin, there's also been some reporting that the gunman was spotted as behaving suspiciously near the security checkpoint, the magnetometers, and then he was seen with a range finder. Can you give us a sense of the details that are coming out about this failure by the Secret Service, signs that were missed, and what are the big questions in your mind that we still don't have answers to?
Sure, Kyle. I mean, this is really what people want to know. This is going to be the most important thing that comes out, over the next few weeks is a real reckoning on the specifics of the strategic failure at the event. I think, in terms of the ability of Americans, taxpayers, to have confidence in the Secret Service, they really need to understand how this could have happened. And there were so many failures. If you think about the security that the Secret Service provides to a protectee, visually, you'd almost think about it as a series of stacked nets, right? If a suspicious person or a threat manages to slip through, the first net, they'll be caught by the second. And if for some crazy reason they manage to also get through that net, they'll be caught by the third and so on. And I think what's so astonishing to everyone about what happened in Butler is that as more information emerges, we realize that the shooter didn't just slip through one hole in the net, but so many. We know he was flagged coming into the rally for suspicious behavior near the magnetometers, so he got past that. Then we know he was seen using a rangefinder. Apparently nothing more happened after that was noticed. Those two things alone should have been enough to get him immediately ejected from the rally or searched by law enforcement or had some sort of delay in Trump coming onto the stage. But instead, he continued on undisturbed and was then spotted up on the roof. Anyone on a roof at a rally should be considered an active threat. Director Cheatle spent a lot of time hair splitting at the hearing yesterday, talking about the difference between, a person of suspicion and an active threat, and saying that just because someone has a backpack on or is loitering in an awkward way near the magnetometers, that doesn't mean they're an active threat. And that's okay as far as it goes, but at some point, especially in a heightened political environment, that needle needs to move a little bit. Certainly, anyone on the roof of a rally should probably be immediately removed, investigated, or if they are an active threat, then they need to be taken out by the sniper. The Secret Service rules of engagement are that they can take out an imminent threat, and that shooter certainly fell into that category long before he started to fire the shots, or even was spotted by local law enforcement and other rallygoers up on the roof.
A couple other thoughts I would add is I'm sure there are going to be questions here about the resourcing of the Secret Service, how many agents it has, how many agents it has assigned to different details in different states for different public officials, how those assignments are made. And then also, Kim, I think there's big questions about the coordination with local law enforcement, because there are not enough Secret Service agents to rely entirely on them for security of these candidates traveling through. So they do rely to some extent on local police, local sheriff's departments to do some of the extra legwork. And Kim, I think there are going to be real questions about what the breakdown there was between the Secret Service and local police who were also on the scene. I don't know if there are any other thoughts that you would add here.
One of the interesting things that's now coming out is that some of the oversight committees and individual members of Congress who are looking into this on their own are finding that a number of whistleblowers are coming forward. So they're actually managing to get a hold of documents themselves, emails that were being sent at the time, other documents that were done in preparation for this event, and others that happened on the day. And they are raising some really interesting questions about the things you and Colin talked about. Chuck Grassley had an interesting letter to the Secret Service demanding more information, but talking about the number of individuals that were assigned to what they call post standers. These are specific spots in the middle perimeter that are meant to guard certain areas. There seem to be very few at the Trump event by comparison, for instance, to an event that was going on for Joe Biden. Now, we don't know what that means. We don't know, as even Senator Grassley said in his letter, he has no idea what the total number of agents were that were there and what the relative necessity was given the space and the number of people, et cetera. There's also, I think Kimberly Cheatle made the point that there are different evaluations made. It's a fine line between people who are currently in government and those who are are out of government and the kind of resources that are there. But those are all going to be discussed. One last thing that came up that I thought was fascinating in the hearing, to your point, Kyle, about local law enforcement, is a question about whether or not they were all really in communication with each other. Did their radios interact? Was there a local law official who was sitting in the command post feeding information from that local team to the Secret Service? How exactly were those two teams interacting with each other? Because the long delay between when some of these local officials noticed the suspicious behavior and when the Secret Service finally took notice of it seemed to be quite some time.